Thank you for being here, and there are a couple of you who have heard me give this talk more than once, and for you, you deserve a special award to hear it. Seriously, Richard has been going along. Last week, I think I gave 15 talks. Everyone actually was a little different. Nevertheless, he was in every single one of them. So it's a sacrifice for the good of the whole is one of those things that's there. So anyway, just to give you context, last week I did a presentation for who in Wellington in the health industry? What's the group called?
Health Safety Relationship Agreement Steering Group.
Okay. And that was my real introduction to people in the sector. The heads of the nurses union were there, the heads of the doctors union, head of the National Health Service was there, and the chairman of this organization, among some other people. And part of the outtake of that was the chairman was very interested about my coming up here, which had been organized by Alex. I met yesterday with your board of directors, did a presentation, shorter form of this, but there was actually questions and discussion. We went over time that had been scheduled. Then yesterday I started a presentation dealing with, what's the group? Yesterday afternoon and this morning?
There's a group of delegates and managers.
Okay. And basically actually had 5.5 hours with them talking about sort of the whole, what are high performance organizations in healthcare, what I'm going to be talking about here, how do you transform an organization in this process. And then last night I had dinner with several of your very senior management leaders, as well as one of the senior representatives from the nurses union and PSA. And we talked about literally the challenges that you're facing here and what that might mean. And I pushed back on some of the things that were said, actually a lot of the things that were said. And it was a very, very, very constructive dialogue. The reason I say that is it's a context for sort of this talk. I think there's some very serious interest. Whether interest will actually, how it translates into action is always the #1 question in all organizations. But there is some very, very serious interest and some very hard thinking that's going on with union and management in the organization about your future, where you're going, and how to go about getting there. And that's really sort of the framing background for the talk and actually why I'm here today. What I'm going to do is just really sort of talk about what is high performance through engagement in the healthcare industry, and in fact give you why organizations look at trying to make this sort of transformation, because fundamentally the reason you do it is results. You get substantially superior performance results on the key indicators in any healthcare delivery system: patient outcomes, patient satisfaction, and cost. And oh, by the way, it's actually a much better place to work. So the people who work in the organization really, really prefer that to traditional organizations. And then I'm going to have a very short example of one specific healthcare company that, you know, is we consider to be a relatively moderate-sized one. It's got 23,000 employees with 11 hospitals and 80 different clinics, but by U.S. standards, it's actually a moderate one. And I'm going to literally show you the roadmap that they did to transform their organization, union and management working together. So that's the overview of what we're doing. This is supposed to be an hour talk. We've already spent a little time, so I'm going to be moving. If anybody has any questions at any point in time, interrupt. I can manage it, and we'll try to answer the question. And if I'm going to come to it in detail, I'll get back to it. But please, I'd far rather have you asking questions than sitting here and sort of saying, well, I wonder what this means, or I disagree with that, or that's not relevant. How's it relevant here? So feel free to ask as we go. So the start point is, why are you people thinking about it in general, and you being the generic worldwide you? Because if you look at healthcare, what you've got is you've got some very strong pressures. I mean, the is at the far end of the spectrum, you got the United States, where 17.5% of our GDP is spent on healthcare. And the expectation is by 2020 it'll be 20% of our GDP is spent on healthcare. We also happen to be the 38th ranked system in the world in terms of the quality of our care. So we're spending a lot, not getting a lot. But if you go to any of the OECD countries, what you see is that actually there's tremendous cost pressures. And as you're getting new technologies and new treatments, the costs are rising, as well as just the sort of normal costs of operation. So at that point in time, you've got a lot of pressures upward on costs. You've got a public treasury that's basically trying to hold things down. and a competitiveness issue. So you've got the cost issue that's facing everyone. It's the higher operating efficiency as populations grow. I know this organization is facing the question in terms of beds. You're pretty close to 100% capacity right now. You've got population increases, growing shifts. The question is sort of how do you actually deliver it? So you've got to be thinking about how can you deliver it more efficiently. Improve patient satisfaction. You know, it's sort of, you know, they're dealing with sort of in life-threatening quality of life issues. It's not great to have people in high levels of pain. We know that affects their healing. I got people who are spending long times in waiting. You know, it doesn't help your healing if you're actually highly aggravated because you've been sitting around waiting for 2 hours, or you're having to spend an extra day or two in a hospital bed because you can't get the test results turned around. Lots of different things like that. So the patient satisfaction directly we know that sort of happy patients actually heal better. That's being flippant, but you get the idea. There's a lot of research on that. Better health outcomes, which is really what the bottom line on health is. How do we get better outcomes? How do we avoid secondary infection? How do we make certain people are made well and don't come back into hospitals, don't go into hospitals in the first place? You know, they're taking the meds, they're managing their sugar, blood sugar, stuff like that, so they don't have falls. How do you do those things to get a better outcome? And then also within the organization, sort of how do you do things in terms of safety? It's not necessarily the major one, but you know, when we first started doing stuff at Kaiser, this was sort of really the safe needles. You had the hepatitis C, you had the HIV. A needle stick could often mean the death of a employee. So at this stage of the game, changing things like that so you get it. There's a lot of lifting things, moving people between beds. How do you get a safer environment for people? More effective problem solving. There's always new problems that are there. How do we sort of do things better? So this is an organization that's actually a very functional organization. It's a pretty good organization. Is it the best in the world? No. But is it a very good organization in which people get along and they do things? Yeah. Could you be a lot better? And the answer is yes. And I think that's really sort of one of the opportunities we could do a better job of it. And then also just the greater engagement. People really wanting to work, not just wanting to do a good job, because you don't go into healthcare if you don't really care. But the issue is, how do we get it so that people actually really, really want to be there and want to work to try to solve problems as opposed to sort of being alienated or being angry at what's going on. So there's lots of opportunities for change in an organization. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to be talking through a couple of examples, but I'm going to really be focusing on Kaiser Permanente. These are all clients that we have had in the last 16 years in the United States. We've actually done some stuff in Australia and Canada, a little bit of stuff in Great Britain. Kaiser Permanente and the COLD, these are the unions, are the initials. So Kaiser Permanente, which is a very large group, I'm going to talk about it. And there's a whole bunch of different unions there, 28 of them. Dignity Health used to be Catholic Health Request. It's a religious-based, 44 different hospitals. And the union's the Service Employees International Union, which boasts nurses in that. Alina, which is the case I'm going to come back to, is in Minnesota. It's a for-profit healthcare, again, service employees. They also have the nurses. The Veterans Administration is obviously, it's the United States government, and it's the veterans. And the employees is the American Federation of Government Employees, who are the union within the federal sector. Montefiore, it's in the inner city of the Bronx in New York. It's a battle zone. Again, it's the SEIU. It's a religious-based Yale University Medical School. And their health services. Unite here is actually, this is an acronym that they use for the Hotel Clerical Workers Union. It's a combination of different unions that were there. They were the people that organized Yale University originally. And then Harvard University, we did both the School of Public Health as well as the medical school. So, universities, academic medical centers, inner city clinics, hospitals, veterans, obviously, different unions, for-profit, religious, and a giant not-for-profit integrated healthcare system. So in terms of when people sort of say, well, this can work in this environment and can't work in that environment, you gotta have it's pretty clear that it can work anywhere in the healthcare delivery system. Let me just be very clear, because the focus of what I'm talking about is engagement. And engagement right now is a term that is thrown around widely, not just in New Zealand, but really pretty much, you know, across all of the OECD. The importance of engagement. There is a survey that has really made it, that is now sort of probably the standard survey, the most common survey out there, which is the Gallup poll. And it's all, a big focus of it is around employee engagement. So that becomes sort of the bellwether of sort of how is an organization doing? What are the engagement scores? And we're going to be trying to improve engagement scores. The issue is, what is engagement? You know, using a word, but you don't know what it is. A lot of people use it and they sort of say, oh, you know what that is? It's going out and we're asking people, their employees. We're bringing people together and asking their ideas. We're communicating everything that's going on. We're asking them what they think of the solutions that we've come up with. That's not what engagement is. It's what people say it is, but it's not really engagement. Because what engagement is really creating an ownership. I own it. It is mine. And because it is mine, I will make certain that it is done. And if it's not done right the first time, I'll go back and I'll fix it until I get it right because it's mine. It's not somebody else's idea. It's not somebody else's decision. It's my decision. Now you can do this as a group, so this is not purely selfish. But it's essentially a process of how do I get the people to own what they do. It's not a case of taking orders and doing what somebody tells you to do. It's creating a culture in which people do what they think is the right thing to do. They've got the skills. Well, we'll start with they're responsible adults, which is 95% of the population, maybe 98% of the population. But people who want to do a good job. Everybody knows there are people who don't care. I'm not talking about those. I'm talking about the people who are responsible adults who really want to do a good job. Making certain that they have the skills to do the job, making certain they know what they have to do, making certain that they understand what their objectives are, and then at that point in time, you don't need somebody supervising them. You don't need somebody whose job it is to make certain that they're doing a good job, because they're responsible adults who know what they're doing. They've got a scoreboard, a metric out there that tells them whether or not they're doing a good job. And that's essentially an engagement culture. So that I'm not going to tell you what the problem is. I'm not going to tell you what the solution is. You're going to tell me what the problem is. And the issue is, here's what's expected. We have to accomplish this. We've got to get 100% of the people in this hospital, anybody who touches the hospital, inoculated against pneumonia. We know death rates go down if everybody's vaccinated against pneumonia. So our objective is nobody who comes in here, visitor, vendor, anybody who comes in, is not inoculated. That's what our objective is. Okay, you make it happen. Tell me how to make it happen. You tell me why we need to make it happen. It's yours. And now what we're going to do is we're going to collectively monitor how we're doing against it. But it's yours. That's where you get high performance. So when you look at what real engagement is, it is very meaningful. It's very substantive. It is involving the people who are closest to the problem. Okay, so it's not getting sort of people, union leadership, or it's not getting the management who are on the outside. It's getting the people who are close to whatever the problem is. It can be a senior manager if they are directly going to be responsible for making that happen. So you get them involved and you go to them and sort of say, okay, we aren't achieving what we need to achieve, or we need to achieve something better. Tell me what the problem is. I'm not going to tell you what the problem is. You're going to tell me what the problem is. You're then going to tell me what the cause of the problem is. You're going to do sort of your root cause analysis. You're going to get down to what are the fundamental causes. Then it's sort of, you tell me what the solution to those causes are. And then tell me what your plan is to actually implement the solutions. And then tell me what your plan is to follow up to make certain it works, and if it doesn't, how you're going to self-correct it. My job as a manager is not to tell you what to do. My job is to ask you the questions because I've got to make certain you've got the skills, make certain you've got the resources. But you are no longer working for me, I'm working for you. I'm there to help you succeed. Because you're closest to the action, so you're supposed to understand and know what's going on. Now you create an organization in which everybody's doing that, and you get extraordinary results because everybody owns everything they're doing. The standard behavior in large organizations everywhere in the world is passive-aggressive. You go into a meeting, somebody tells you what to do, and you say, yes. And then you walk out and you do the same thing you've always been doing. And when it doesn't work, you sit there and say, I knew that. That was a stupid idea. And the further away you are from the center, the easier it is because nobody ever comes to check up on you. So it's really great. I was talking to a PSA organizer in North New Zealand, He sort of said, I mean, it was very funny. I mean, we were actually in very good discussion. He just sort of said, well, I just do whatever I want to do because nobody ever comes up here. But that's the way large organizations operate. It's passive aggressive. I just do my thing. I keep my head down and I just do it and I say all the right answers. And that's why you don't get extraordinary performance, because you don't have the commitment at that point of view. You know, I've been told to do this, but I don't think this is, I know there's a better way to do it. But I just have been told I'm supposed to follow orders, and I'm not going to be irresponsible, but I don't own it. So the issue is, how do I create an organization in which people own it? And it's through engagement. And when you do it, you get dramatically different results. Now what you find if you go to literally the world-class organizations, regardless of their industry, you find certain patterns of behavior that exist in the organizations. Start is their employee base. They all understand that the employees are who deliver the results. And again, it's not just at the front, bottom line, it's employees throughout the organization. That's how you get performance. And the world's greatest technology does not deliver anything. I have yet to find a computer that turns itself on. So at that point in time, you've got to get the people. And you've got to have their hearts and minds. And that's what gives you a better result. So they're designed to get that out of people. And as I go through this, I'm going to circle back to this. That means you don't say that it's the employees are most important. I did an analysis, my firm did an analysis in the mid-1980s at the 500 largest companies in the United States. Over 350 of them said their most valuable asset were their employees. And I actually had some of my staff do this thing. They came back with it. These are corporate value statements that we're coming back with. I literally laughed when I saw it. Because what happens when you have an economic downturn? Item number one on the list, oh, we're going to lay some people off. So you think about it. I don't know how many of you have kids. You take your firstborn, because we know I'm not the firstborn, so that's why I say this. They are your most valuable asset. It's the secondborn. I've lived with it my entire life. Anyway, the firstborn is your most valuable asset, so what's the first time you actually have an economic problem? Oh, well, up for adoption. Get rid of them. You're out on the street. Take care of yourself. If your employees are truly where you get your performance and they're your most valuable asset, then you actually treat them and treasure them. And you develop them and you take care of them. And it's one of the reasons that in the introduction the comment was made, if you actually look at the 100 best places to work, and you look at the world-class organizations, they aren't exactly the same, but there's a very, very close overlap between them. In whatever the industry sector they are, because they treasure their employees. There's an understanding by everybody in the organization you exist for your customers. You exist because of your patients. Technically, if all of a sudden there was perfection and nobody got sick, you would not exist. So at that point in time, your role, and in healthcare people understand it, it's to help make people's lives better, improve the quality of their life, or make them well. But that drives every decision because you're always constantly doing this. When my mother was dying of breast cancer, my father was with her in the hospital, and they were walking up down the side, up and down the corridor of this hospital, which is a very good one in Washington, D.C., supposedly. And there was a very elderly woman who had cancer who was out in the hallway, and she was asking for water. Doctors went by, staff went by. Nobody gave her any water. It wasn't their job. My father got her water. You know what? That's not focused on the customer. So it's creating a culture in which everybody sort of says, you know what? It doesn't matter what my job is. They come first. And everybody talks about patient-centric care. This is not what this is. This is actually really sort of saying, okay, if I'm making somebody wait for an hour and a half to do something, I'm saying their time is not valuable, or their time is not as valuable as me, except, oh, by the way, I exist because of them. So their time is actually more valuable than mine. So how do I re-engineer this so that they have a short wait time rather than a long wait time? It's a very different way of thinking about the organization. Performance-driven continuous improvement. It's a basic bottom line is no matter how good we are today, we've got to get better tomorrow. And how do we do that in a structured way? And oh, by the way, what we're going to do is we're going to have a scoreboard so we can keep track of this, and that scoreboard is going to be transparent to everybody. Because when we fall short, everybody's going to know it, and then we can all pull together to try to turn it around. So the organizations are very transparent organizations. And there's a very strong sense of we've got to get better. Now, every single person in here is a beneficiary of organizations that operate that way, because whenever you go out and buy any new technology, the first thought that comes to people's mind is, well, you know, if I wait 9 months, it's going to be cheaper. What is that? That's a model of continuous improvement. Your laptop, your computer, your phone, stuff like that, they are more powerful and they're cheaper in the future because those organizations are out there constantly driving performance. They're never satisfied with where they are. The business model relies on the discretionary effort and judgment of employees. That means that we aren't telling everybody to just do their job. We're asking you to go above and beyond the job. It's give the elderly lady a glass of water. You can be in a hurry and stuff like that, but it's the basic humanity, and that's really why you exist. So it's stepping up. It's using it and not saying, oh, I can't do that because that's against the rules. It's sort of saying, okay, we've got a problem. Let's figure out how we can solve this. Solve your problem. It's a very different way of thinking. There is a high engagement organization. It's not a group of people who meet once in a while to solve a problem, or it's not something where this problem we're going to go to the people. It is literally every single thing that goes on in an organization. It's pervasive. We are going to get to the people who are at the front line of whatever that problem is. We're going to ask them what the problem is. We're going to ask them what the causes are. We're going to ask them what the solution is. We're going to ask them what their implementation plan is. We're going to ask them what the follow-up closing the loop is. Everything that goes on in the organization is dealt with that fashion. And there's a consistency across the organization. How we hire people, how we train people, how we promote people, how we compensate people, how we communicate with people. If I'm going to have an open information system, then actually I'm not going to have a situation where I'm going to give you a computer with a screen that's fixed. From a software point of view, it's actually given it possible to give people computer screens so you can design your own screen. The engineering on it's really easy. But most organizations don't want to do that because at that point in time they lose control over it. But think of an organization in which you are given your computer, you're taking people into the hospital, you're doing anything like that, you're in a nurse's station, and you can actually design the screen to fit whatever your needs are to get the job done more efficiently. It's a very different way, but it's bringing alignment in all the system. New systems of work. Traditional organizations, command and control, fractionated work, silos. What you find in these organizations is they flatten them out, they break down barriers, they cross-train, they expect people to be flexible. Now obviously in healthcare there is knowledge that, and in many cases legal requirements. You don't have somebody who's not trained drawing blood, simple. You don't have somebody taking x-rays who doesn't know anything about radiation. There's skills involved, but at the same time you can create greater flexibility in the systems. You can organize work around teams for delivery systems. True teams, not simply the fact that they're called a team. So they operate as an integrated unit. And the key to it is one of the classic examples on this is if you go into traditional organizations, the average ratio, Great Britain, the United States, Canada, and Australia, is you have one line manager for every 10 employees. I'm rounding the numbers off. So think about it. I'm not talking staff, I'm talking line managers. Okay? If you go into, and if you look at the numbers, it's pretty accurate. Sometime in the public sector, the numbers actually fall, so it's like 1 in 7. You go into high-performance organizations, the ones we're talking about, and the ratio is 1 to 40 to 50. Why? Because I start with responsible people, I make certain they're well-trained, who understand what it is they have to do, I give them the power to do it, and at that point in time, there is no role in that organization for somebody who's sitting there looking over the shoulder to make certain that somebody is doing their job. So there's just no boss. There's management. There's a lot of management that has to go on in the organization. That's still there. But there's nobody whose job it is to be a boss. And in fact, what happens, these organizations, instead of designing around the 5% of the troublemakers, they design around 95% of the people who are actually good, responsible, knowledgeable people. Analytical problem solving. I understand that Lean Six Sigma has invaded New Zealand. These are tools. They're no different than a scalpel. They are no different than any other gauze bandage. They are merely a tool you use to solve a problem. They are not a way to manage people. They are not a device to control people. They are tools for the people to use in an organization to solve problems. I was hired by the CEO of Motorola in 1980 because they had set up something they call Participative Management Program, PMP. The idea was we are going to involve people in improving their performance. They got great results one month. Then they had terrible results the next month. Then they had great results. Because they had really highly motivated people who were doing all sorts of different things. So Bob Galvin, his father founded the company, brought me in. So I said, look, we've got this participating management. You understand this stuff. What's going wrong? Why aren't we getting these results on a continuing basis? And basically, in analyzing the system, what became clear is they didn't have a rigorous, analytical, disciplined system. So I said, if you really want this to work and to capture it and sustain it, you're going to have to create this sort of system. So what we did, I actually led the group, we designed what, after they relabeled it, became Six Sigma. We designed Six Sigma. It was not something that management was supposed to use as a tool. We designed Six Sigma to give every single employee in Motorola that extra hammer or that extra wrench so that they could be more effective. It was a problem-solving tool. Now, obviously what happened is they started getting all sorts of benchmarking companies. So, wow, you're getting all these results. What are you doing? And they saw this and people picked it up. And then the consultants got it and they needed to have a label. So they said, oh, well, think of something. And it's actually a statistical analytical process. So we'll call it Six Sigma. There's actually a logic for it. And then the consultants picked it up and sort of said, oh, we're going to start packaging and selling it. Well, you don't sell it to the workforce. You sell it to senior management. And if management's interested in trying to control things, then actually this becomes a management control device. And it's something what we're going to do is we're going to have managers go in and start to do it. So it shifted over the years from being a device that every single employee would have in their toolkit to use to solve a problem to a device that management's going to go in and we're going to do it to you. So when you look at lean, I've been talking to all these government agencies and they're saying, oh, we're doing Lean Six Sigma. And then what is it? Well, we got a management team that are going in and they're doing analysis. It's basically, that one is old-fashioned industrial engineering. You get your stopwatch, you go in. And what the Six Sigma is just it's an analytical device. It's a bunch of statistics, actually, and some very simple things like process mapping and stuff like that. It's a very, very simple process. But that's what it is. What we're talking about, all these organizations use it, but the way they use it is every single employee uses it. So if I've got a problem, what I'm finding is I'm a district nurse and my patients aren't taking their blood pressure medicine. I'm not going to just say, oh, this will solve that problem. You actually use analytical tools. Let's really look at it. Let's do a cost-benefit analysis. Look at our options. So you use a problem-solving analysis, and that's what goes on in these organizations. If you don't have the information, then you can't solve the problem. So organizations say, we've got to cut our costs. Well, what are our costs? I don't know. Well, what's our budget? I don't know. So how much does it do to, what's the cost of giving somebody a flu shot? Anybody know? There is a cost to giving somebody a flu shot. So what's the cost of it? You want me to reduce costs? What's the cost of a bypass surgery? Double, triple, they're different. What's the cost of making certain that if somebody misses their blood pressure medicine and they have to come into the hospital, what's the cost of it? You can figure all these things out. Well, if you want to reduce costs, I have to have that information in order to solve the problem. So a big emphasis in these organizations is how do I have transparent information? It's not a case of management sort of saying, oh, well, we need to give the employees this information or we need to give the employees this information. It's essentially we need to make certain that we have a transparent organization so everybody has all the information at their fingertips so that they can use that information to solve problems. Because again, it's pretty hard to solve a problem if you don't have the information. You may be very well intentioned, but you're basically shooting in the dark. So if I'm going to have a high performance organization, I'm going to make certain it's there. It's innovative and flexible. It's, again, we've been doing it this way for 20 years. That's irrelevant. It's how do we get better at what we're doing. So whenever anybody says, well, that's the way we do it here, you know they've just said we are not high performance. It's when we're looking to get better that they're high performance. Re-engineered management systems was actually the term that was used prior to Lean. Lean was labeled later. The concept in re-engineering is you go through and step by step every single thing and you ask yourself, do we really need to do this? If I don't need to do it, then let's not do it. That's what eliminating waste is. It's an extraordinarily complicated subject, eliminating waste. It is, if I don't need to do it, why am I doing it? So if I could get by with 5 people signing the document rather than 6 people signing the document, then you've just eliminated waste. And you go through the entire process, everything in the system, every single thing, and you ask that question. And if you go to a group of people in any organization, anywhere in the organization, and you ask them, are there things that you do that you don't need to do, or that don't add any value? I don't care whether you're a vice president of an organization, whether you're in the administration, whether you are a doctor, they're going to be able to say, oh yeah, this is stupid, and that's usually the way they frame it. This is stupid. But that's how you turn an organization into lean. Again, it's not something that management does to you. It's something that you go through and start saying, these things that are irritating and have been irritating for long, let's just stop doing it. And then the emphasis on training and development. Go into the top performing organizations in the world. The average amount of training ratio is they spend close to 10% of their payroll a year. So you take the top 5% of performing organizations in any industry sector, they will average close to 10% of their payroll a year on training. Great Britain, Canada, the United States, and Australia. You take the average organization in those 4 countries, they spend approximately 2.5% of their payroll on training. So the superstar companies invest 10%, so 200 hours a year of training per employee every single year they're there. So if an employee's been with you 10 years, that means they've actually only worked 9 years and they spent 1 year in training. So now I'll go back to employee-based. I, as a company, have just made this investment in this employee. I have an economic downturn. What am I going to do with that employee? I've just spent a year training this person. I'm not going to lay this person off. I may get to the point where I don't have an alternative, but I'm not going to lay this person off. I've invested too much in this person. They matter too much. From an employee point of view, I came in, I'm a radiology tech. I'd really like to earn an MRI. I'd like to get into therapeutic radiation. You know what? We want you. We want to develop you. We'll pay for your training. We'll help bring you up. We'll help you find time in order to get it. We want to bring your skills up because you have greater value to us as an organization if we do that. So what's going to happen? We have an economic downturn. I don't want to lay you off because you're full of knowledge and skills that I built you that are unique to my organization. Now, Kaiser Permanente. It's why you do this. It's the performance results. Kaiser is America's largest, and it's also the top performing, which I'm going to come back to. It's a not-for-profit. It is an integrated healthcare system. Hospitals, doctors, clinics, insurance. It's the closest thing the United States has to a national healthcare system. It's obviously a small part of the whole system. They only have 8.7 million members in 8 different states, largely on the West, but some on the East Coast. It's $47.9 billion in revenue, gross revenue, and $2 billion in net debt. If this was a for-profit company, they'd say they'd have $2 billion in profit. They don't, and by law, because they're not for-profit, they actually have to reinvest this in good causes. So actually what Kaiser's good cause is, they largely invested in community health. So going into underserved areas and sort of trying to build up preventive care, things of that sort. So it's an integrated system, full range, 569 different locations, hospitals, clinics, and central offices. Today, they're the highest quality in every market in which they operate. They're number 1 in terms of healthcare delivery. They've got over 167,000 employees, 16,000 doctors, 47,000 nurses. So, I mean, this is not a small organization. Over 100,000, it's about just short of 110,000 union members, 28 different local unions. There's a structural thing. Think of them as independent unions. They all have their own contracts, things of that sort. They formed a group called the Coalition of Kaiser Permanente Unions. So they all act in concert with each other as sort of a single voice. They try to do that even though they're separate. In 1997, they formed a labor management partnership. Now, let me give you the context. In 1996, Kaiser was in the process. They were less than 3 years from going bankrupt. They were losing just short of $400 million a year. They were in major combat with its unions, to the point where literally the union leaders would not get in the same room, and management wouldn't get in the same room with the union leaders. Unions were picketing the schools of the children of senior executives. Not just with signs saying nasty things about the leaders, but actually with drums and horns and drawing a lot of attention. They were also doing their houses. So it was a very adversarial environment. The unions had raised money. They were going to begin a nationwide television advertising campaign against Kaiser Permanente, saying that it was a dangerous place to go. At that point in time, who wants to go to some place where you're going to die when you shouldn't? And that was basically what their campaign was going to be. So they were basically on the verge of a nuclear war between them. At that point in time, the top of the AFL-CIO, which is the collection of unions in the United States, and the CEO of the company pulled back and sort of said, oh, there's got to be a better way. And we need to go out, let's go out and hire a consultant. I was fortunate, they talked to 18 different firms. I was fortunate enough to get the bid. Or it wasn't a bid, they came to me. And we created a partnership between them. Now, what we started with in this concept was, okay, we're all in this boat together. We actually all want to deliver high quality care. We understand cost pressures. We need to turn things around. Now the focus was, our advice and the focus was, we're not going to spend time talking about a relationship, trust building. You know, let's go out and do a retreat and get to know each other better. What we said was, you're going to build a relationship by doing things. Let's tackle the toughest problems we face organizationally, together, jointly, in a structured analytical process, facilitated, that was our role, make sure that they didn't kill each other, which was not, you know, the American gun culture, that's actually a real possibility in the United States. But actually to get people to work through these problems. And the idea is, we're going to go to war, we're going to get in the trenches, and when we have won the war, we're going to get out of the trenches and actually we'll have a real partnership. And the focus of this was essentially two strategies for transforming the organization. One was, we'll take natural events. Just, you know, there's a forest fire that breaks out here, we'll fight the fire together. And then secondly was, in a systematic way, let's transform the organization. It has ranged in terms of building the engagement to an automated patient record system. They're spending $5.5 billion to put an integrated automated patient record system. It links finances, it links patient records, it's across the entire organization. So there's literally, it's seamless. Doesn't matter where you go in, doesn't matter. Sort of, if we want to collect the bill, it's all part of a single data system. They had spent $500 million. They went out to an outside vendor, brought them in, designed the system. They took it to roll it out with some employees, and it was a disaster. And the reason is because this was a classic outside vendor who come in and told them what they ought to do. The $5.5 billion plan is actually, they went to the employees, all the users in the system, and again, we facilitated this. They have designed their own information systems. They are now in the process of rolling it out, literally implementing it. And what they found in the rollout is the uptake is literally less than 1 week without any significant hitches in the entire system. Now, you know, it was not a small deal designing all this. It's obviously a major investment. But what they found is they're getting a huge success track by doing that. The patient tracking system, unit-based teams, that is literally going to the coalface in every aspect of the delivery of the healthcare, in creating people, training them, and teaching them how to operate as a team to improve, solve problems, improve performance in their particular area. There's now over 10,000 of them that are active. Now, it's a good-sized organization, but 10,000 is still a large number. And it's not as if they go in and they tackle one thing and that's it. They're constantly just picking up things. What are our issues? Well, we've got a secondary infection problem. We've got a waste problem here. We've got a pain management problem here. We've got whatever it happens to be. People aren't getting the drugs at the right time. People are having to wait too long. And they just go after what are the big issues, what are the big issues. They're getting small issues and big issues because they're now fairly mature. But it's an engagement policy as a practice. As I was doing that, it's a joint collaborative decision. There is literally nothing. We're going to close a hospital. It's a joint decision process. We're going to open a hospital. It's a joint decision process. We're going to move into a new market. It's a joint decision process. We've got to raise money from the capital markets because we've got to earthquake-proof our hospitals. It's a joint decision-making process. There is nothing that goes on. In the beginning, there was huge discussions about what ought to be involved or not. Now it's just automatic. Union, leadership, they're involved in every decision. Every union leader in the company signs a confidentiality agreement, and it is far more teeth in that confidentiality agreement than you'll find in anything in any investment bank in New York. And there has never been a single breach. Every piece of information the company has, those people have access to. It's a transparent organization, and they're involved in all the decisions now. When we started this, huge debates out of whether or not should the unions be involved in moving into a new market? You know what? They're going to have to make it happen. They actually may be able to help it make it happen. Let's get them to the table. And then bringing on the middle level. So it was literally understanding, we've got to get the people in the middle. Now understand all this. The doctors are active parties in this. Doctors are employed. It's a weird organization. You've got Kaiser Permanente. Permanente is a partnership of doctors who operate on a for-profit basis. Kaiser is a not-for-profit corporation that owns the hospitals, owns the clinics, has the back office. The doctors in every one of their areas has their own partnership. So there's 12 different regions. There are 12 different partnerships of doctors. Northern California has one, Southern California has one, Colorado has one. So the doctors have that. They fit within state licensing boards and stuff like that. Those 12 different doctors' partnerships, we're all for-profit, have formed a master partnership of Permanente, which is then in a partnership with Kaiser, which is now in a partnership with its unions. If it sounds complex, it is. Realistically, though, what it means is, as we're going through this, everything, when we talk about the partnership, it is doctors, it is union, and it is the company, management, and we're doing everything collaboratively. We aren't drawing lines and sort of saying, you're out, you're not, wherever. Everything we're talking about is there. Middle-level leaders, it's to make certain that you're on top of it. You're involved. You can't move out this middle. So we're going to have to teach new skills. It's different when you go into a group and you make a declarative sentence, a declarative statement, as opposed to asking a question. In an engagement culture, you ask questions. Managers turn into Socrates. It's simply asking a whole series of leading questions. You don't tell people answers. You ask them questions. They'll tell you the answers based on their knowledge, experience, and what they're dealing with. Okay, the accomplishments. First of all, if you remember, they were losing a ton of money. How do you create a partnership? We got to go after and we've got to turn it around. And oh, by the way, we had a state law. There was a major earthquake in the late 1980s in California, so they made state law mandating earthquake-proofing all sort of health-related buildings. They were looking at a $13.5 billion cost at that point in time to earthquake this. So not only did they have to get it back into the black, but they actually had to raise the money in order to earthquake-proof all the buildings. So we sat down, union and company, facilitated, structured process, 18-month target, we need to pull $1 billion out in our costs. They didn't have a partnership. There had been no relationship building other than at the margin level. They built a relationship by doing that. They got it done in 15 months. That's fully implemented, the money saved, okay? That wasn't to put together a plan. So they actually saved it within that period of time. They then started to say, we need to follow with what we're getting, return on investment on this. And what they said was, let's analyze the returns we get directly from the partnership. We put in a new computer system, that doesn't count. Because a lot of the returns may come from the computers. We put in a new x-ray machine, that doesn't count. We're going to look at things where only the savings can be solely attributed to the result of labor and management working together, we're employees through the engagement process. Their own internal numbers is between the first 8 years of the partnership, $1.8 billion in savings. Now this doesn't talk about better health outcomes, it doesn't talk about patient satisfaction, this is just costs. So when people look at sort of, why are you doing this? Well, we got $1 billion here and another $1.8 billion here. So we can directly attribute $2.8 billion in savings that have come out of this process in the first 8 years. By any standard, that's actually fairly significant. And those numbers, they will tell you, are very, very conservative in what they've done. I'm not going to go through all these things, but you know, in Southern California, work groups identified savings of $89.5 million over 3 years. Northern California, it's labor management partnership. Somebody from the maternity area came in, and I forgot what they said LMP stood for, but anyway, it's not that. This is labor management partnership work groups. 13 recommendations, 48.7 1 year, 52.3. The Ohio ambulatory redesign, 12.5. 12.5, so that's not very big. Well, they actually had a budget of $70 million. So they basically just pulled out almost a fifth of their budget. And they actually did it in this 1 year. And then you go through this. Again, the focus was not just on cost. So we're looking at patient satisfaction, reduce wait time from an hour to 20 minutes. Again, this is not marginal. Increase the number of patient schedules from 1 week within 1 week. So a person calls up to the scheduled appointment. It was at 35%, it's now at 76%. Telephone wait times 5 minutes or less. It used to be 15 to 20 minutes. So you call and you sit there and have dinner and watch a movie, and then they answer your phone. The referrals, again, processing time from 30 to 10 days. And these were all sort of snapshots. Actually, in every single one of those cases, they've actually driven them further. Workplace safety, again, you got 25, 23, 24, 36, 23% reductions in injuries. What you start to see is these are not small numbers. This is a huge impact. And what's happening is it's all around engagement. I'm not going to tell you what to do. I'm not even going to tell you what the problem is. We're going to look at what the result is, and you're going to tell me what the problem is, what's the cause, the solution, and people work it out to improve it. One of the best examples that really brings it home was there's this hospital in East Los Angeles, which is where the growth area was. And the way Kaiser works, we're an integrated system. If you don't do it, we've got to pay to send you to a non-Kaiser hospital. And in this part, which is the fastest growing part of Los Angeles, they were spending $1 million a day sending Kaiser people to other people's hospitals. That's expensive. So $365 million a year in cost. Said, we need to open this hospital. This was a shell of a hospital they built in the 1980s. Every single person in here who's ever watched a medical movie or a medical show has seen the hospital because it was empty for 10 years, and this is in LA. So Hollywood used this hospital, which was a full hospital, it was just a shell though, as a set for all medical television and all medical movies, all hospital scenes between 1986 and 1996. Seriously, you've all seen it. So, not huge, only 240 beds. Normally, Kaiser's opened a lot of hospitals. It took them, they said, we know it takes us 2 years to open a hospital. They needed to speed it up because they're spending a lot of money. Take it 2 years, that's $730 million in cost. We created a joint union employee doctor management collaborative structured analytical design process. Starting on March 1st, we facilitated the process. There were over 240 people in the room. And we were going to design it. We were going to say, where do you put the computer nurses stations? Where do you put the computer? What wires do you have to have? How do you position the x-ray machine? Which x-ray machine? We designed literally, we had a shell of a building. This is it, take everything out, they designed it. It opened on October 1st. Now, 8 months, do the arithmetic, about $240 million, assuming a 30-day month, as opposed to $720 million. Now, on top of that, it's the top performing hospital in Kaiser Permanente to this day. Yes?
You've said that it's focused on patient-centered care, but I don't see the patient in your collaborative.
Yeah.
Did you have...
We had lots of discussions about that. The one thing is, everybody knows in healthcare, everything's measured. I mean, everything's measured. And including around patient satisfaction and stuff like that. And Kaiser is literally at reams of it. So what they did was the surrogate for actually bringing in a patient and customers of their system was to actually, when they're designing things, going back to all this data that they collect and doing that. But it's different, yes.
I mean, experience-based design, experience might be your staff, it might be your patients. I think that's probably where we're looking to move, rather than our patient satisfaction is actually quite poor, but I think actually getting people who are going to use the services, helping you design them.
There's no question. To try to do this in the cycle time we were looking at, we basically sort of said, let's use the data, because one of the things that Kaiser does is before you leave, it's slightly intrusive if you use them, they actually do a survey before you leave. They will then call you at home, in many cases visit you 48 hours after you leave, and then they get back to you 2 weeks after you leave. So for every single patient touch, you actually give 3 data points in terms of how you think that you've been served. And they're the soft things like wait times, how people treat you, to the hard stuff. So they literally, when I say, I mean, they had a lot of data. It's not the same thing as having them in the room, but since we were in a cycle time in which we need to get this done, we just said this is too complicated, and we encouraged, I mean, we as a consultant said,
Because I have seen some hospitals that achieve similar results, not with joint union involvement, but with patient
Yep.
and family involvement.
Absolutely.
I don't think it's an either or. I'm just saying
No,
that.
no, absolutely, there is no question. The idea of getting the users engaged in the design in anything produces a better result. No question at all. Again, they did things like taking operating room. The average in the company was, in Kaiser at that point in time was between 40 and 45 minutes between surgery. They got it down to 19 minutes. The benchmark within the company is now 20 minutes in the organization. It was originally driven here, prenatal. You can see that they basically, on a lot of different ones, it literally reinvented how you did the hospital and has become sort of a benchmark. One of the big things in Kaiser is driving the performance results. So you start to look at it and you go through the different regions. I'm not going to spend a lot of time. They're automating patient record systems. Okay, they took it down. First cut, it was going to take 62 days to convert. They now have it down to 2. Their now objective is at the same day. So they're going to have it at 1, probably within 2 months. They'll have it down to 1 day. Ambulatory care, again, the pre-op, 10.8%, where it wasn't properly delivered, down to 0.27%. If you look at the post-operative care, pain management, again, it was 60% of the patients were reported to be at tolerable levels of pain. Now it's over 95%. So again, this isn't sort of small differences, and they were the result of this process. The union did an employee attitude survey in lead up to negotiations. They asked if you could stay in the same job. So between 98, they did this periodically. 56% of the people said they'd stay in the same job, jumped to 73%. This is actually one that's slightly more interesting. Kaiser management can be trusted. So you're looking at it. In 1998, 4% said strongly, 20%, so 24% said yes. In 2005, you're dealing with 49%. It's a massive change in terms of people's attitudes. And the only real variable that had changed, in fact, it was the same management team at this point in time, was the labor management partnership. Same thing in terms of people's perceptions, the overall quality of care. 19% said excellent, jumped to 44%. 54 said good, it dropped down to 45. So you end up with 89% versus the 73%. Again, anytime you do statistics and employee attitude surveys and you're getting a 20% change in your numbers, that's a massive change. Again, I'm not going to spend any real time in it. Tampa, it's a veterans hospital, went through, same sort of process. Again, little things, but we showed that, the x-ray no-shows from 50% to 5%. I mean, major changes in terms of operating performance, the delivery of drug. Again, cycle time decreased from 92 minutes to 25 minutes. They actually are now driving that down further. They've actually almost got it down by another third. Operating utilization room, again, you can look at the numbers. Significant improvements, essentially through the engagement model that we've talked about. X-ray results, again, the overall process time from 8.5 to 1 hour, 1 day. Again, it just changes things. Kaiser actually has a standard for where it is medically possible, scientifically possible to do a lab test. They will have it between the ordering the lab test and they will have it back the same day. That's their metric across the organization now. So at that point in time, it's really trying to drive the results. That obviously allows for better care and it actually gets people in and out of hospitals more efficiently. Transformation process, there's a few key things. I want to focus on just a couple of them. One is leadership. It will not happen if the leaders are not committed. All the other things you can sort of work around. They make it very difficult to succeed. Bottom line is, if your leadership team, union, your leadership team management is not committed to this transformation, it will not succeed. And you can start things in different places and try to build some momentum, but the bottom line gets down to there's got to be that commitment there. You're going to have to spend the money on the education and training. You're going to have to hold people accountable. People don't earn with the program. You're doing it not because it's fun, but because you've got to get results. And you're going to have ups and downs. You're going to end up having to persevere. When something doesn't go right, you don't give up. You're doing it because you've got to. So, and it's going to change. It's going to affect how the unions behave, how they operate, their capability, as well as within management. There's a lot of new skills, a lot of new practices in these organizations. There's a certain set of assumptions in all of these. You can't do it sequentially. You have to move on a number of fronts simultaneously. It'll simply take too long. You've got a lot of change efforts that are going on right now, whether it's the 20,000 beds, whether it's the smoking issue, all of these things aren't stopped. They're part of it. You use the engagement approach to solving these problems. You use engagement, use the tools of the Lean, Six Sigma, stuff like that, as tools of engagement. So it's not replacing these things, it's not creating something parallel, it's doing that. And then it's the classic, you try it, you learn from it, you go back. That's standard. You're never going to get it right. It's a principle of incompletion. We're never done. We're constantly learning, improving. And the focus is on meaningful results. Don't talk about low-hanging fruit. Low-hanging fruit requires no effort. That's the whole point of low-hanging fruit. Just stick your hand up. That's it. So what they do is to build a relationship, to build the system, you go after what are the most important challenges you're facing. If it's 20,000 beds, then you know what? You go after that. That's where you devote your time and attention, because if you're successful in it, everybody's going to know, wow, this is really powerful. And it's across the organization. This isn't something that just a bunch of leaders do. Now, there's a bunch of different ways to do it. You can start with a clean slate and just design from scratch. We have a lot of knowledge. If we were starting all over, how would we do it right? You can bring people together, as we've been talking about, as Kaiser did, where you bring people together, they tackle the tough issues, and they'll redesign the organization. And then you can, if you're in smaller groups, you can actually bring everybody together in this single room. 200-300 people in the same room, and they redesign their system. Awatea, just one example. You know, it's not big, 2 billion, 23,000 employees, 11 hospitals. But it's a complex organization. What you have in the next 3 slides, is literally the work plan that was submitted that have been developed jointly by Labor and Management to the Board of Directors of Awatea, which was a for-profit healthcare delivery system, for approval to finance the transformation of the organization into an engagement culture. This is the first year work plan. So everything on here was going to be completed within the first year. This is literally the requested funding. They had PERT charts, they had budgets and all those. I can't share those because those are private. But the only thing that happened first was to set up the leadership structure. So overall for the entire system, a joint labor management group, senior leaders, whose job it was to orchestrate, manage, supervise this process, approve changes, and then at each one of the work units, hospitals, clinics, whatever, they set up a similar group. Okay, that happened first. Then you start moving in parallel. Communicate to everybody in the organization why you're changing, where it is you're trying to drive things, what is going to happen, what the next steps are. We want to make certain this doesn't get derailed along the way, so we want to make certain we deal with conflicts that are going to be a normal part of occurrence. It's a traditional organization. So we're going to train people out of conflict, and we're going to make certain that everybody understands the union agreements so that they don't end up doing something stupid that causes a forest fire that stops all the rest of the change. The guts of the change process is by doing it at each level in the organization, each of the hospitals, clinics, and overall, there was a joint group of people using the engagement tools, heavily facilitated, analytical problems. Let's take the 2 or 3 toughest issues. You've got 3 to 4 months to analyze the problem, come up with a solution, come up with the implementation plan, and the follow-up, ready to pull the trigger at the end of that 3 to 4 month period. Within the first year, you can go through 2 different cycles. So if you're a hospital or you're a clinic, we are going to go after the 4 to 6 biggest problems that you have and develop plans to implement to solve those problems. That's how you build the relationship. They chose to build the relationship. And then we're going to institutionalize communications. We're going to make certain you've got metrics. In healthcare, everything's measured. The problem when you measure everything is you measure nothing. So let's really define what is quality. Let's really define what our costs are. Let's define what our patient outcomes are in a way that everybody can understand and we can share them. We've got to make sure that all managers really know how to operate in this new way, so we're going to have to train them, and we aren't going to wait a couple years to do that. The one real different approach in here was they just chose to take a major unit and clean slate design it. Whiteboard, people in it, saying, we all have a lot of experience. If we were starting all over, what would it look like? You finish that, then you start to say, how do we move from point where we are today to where we want to be in the future? We know where we want to be. Once you have that sense, it accelerates the change process. And you get the big results. I've never seen this happen where you don't get a 30 to 40% improvement in that performance. Never. I've been doing this now for nearly 40 years. A wide range of different technologies. And then it was building the evaluation system. So it's going to the board and say, we're going to be evaluating, this is going to be tough. We're going to have clear objectives. We're going to be measuring how we do against it. It's not the number of people who get training. It's actually what are our key performance indicators, what are the improvements in performance. And if we aren't getting it, then we're going to circle back. This is an actual work plan for the first year of transforming an organization. As you can see, it's very comprehensive. It's on a lot of different fronts. You don't have a mature organization at the end of it, but you have an organization that is way down the path in trying to transform itself. That's it. I'm 5 minutes over, sorry. Great.